There are moments in life when the air itself feels charged with something unseen, as if the very fabric of reality is shifting. You did not arrive here by accident. The hand of God has led you to this precise moment, not as a mere observer, but as one chosen for transformation. This is not simply an adjustment of thoughts or a fresh perspective, it is a divine awakening, a calling that will shape the course of your life. The burdens of doubt, struggle, and fear have weighed upon you for too long. But now, the time of wandering is over. The Creator of the universe is not merely knocking at the door, He is commanding entry, ready to dwell within you, to reshape your path with His presence. The power of God is not distant or abstract, it is alive, waiting to manifest through you. The old self is passing away, a new self is emerging, filled with divine strength, purpose, and unstoppable destiny. Trusting God's plan, overcoming doubt and embracing faith. The night was thick with silence. The stars shimmered above like a council of watchful eyes, their cold glow casting a quiet judgment upon the earth. In the heart of a small village, a man stood alone, wrestling with the weight of uncertainty. He had followed the call of God, yet now, in the face of hardship and rejection, doubt crept into his mind like an unwelcome guest. Had he misunderstood? Had he been mistaken in believing that he was chosen? The questions gnawed at him, relentless and unyielding. He had heard of others who had faltered, Moses hesitating before Pharaoh, Gideon questioning his own strength, Thomas doubting the very presence of Christ. Could he, like them, be struggling to trust? Then came the voice, soft yet steady. "Why do you doubt? Have I not led you here?" It was not an audible sound, but a whisper in his soul, a truth that resonated beyond words. He thought of Abraham, who had left his homeland without knowing his destination. Of Mary, who had accepted her divine calling despite the fear it must have brought. Their faith had been the bridge between uncertainty and fulfillment. They had trusted, even when the road ahead was shrouded in mist. The world often plants seeds of doubt, urging people to question their worthiness, their calling, their place in God's plan. Yet faith is the key that unlocks the door to divine transformation. Without it, spiritual gifts remain dormant, waiting in the shadows, unclaimed and unused. A weary traveler approached, his eyes reflecting the burdens he carried. "I do not know if I am worthy," he confessed. "I have waited for a sign, but nothing comes. I wonder if God has forgotten me." The man, now strengthened by the truth stirring in his heart, met the traveler's gaze. God's timing is perfect. He does not forget, nor does he delay without reason. A seed does not sprout the moment it is planted. It must rest beneath the soil, unseen yet alive, until the appointed time. So it is with faith. The traveler hesitated. "But what if I am too weak? What if my faith is not enough?" "Faith is not about the absence of doubt," the man said. "It is about choosing to trust despite it. Even the smallest ember can ignite a great fire. The moment you surrender fully to God's plan, you will find that what was once hidden will begin to manifest naturally." A breeze stirred through the trees, whispering its agreement. The traveler's eyes, once clouded, now held a flicker of light. "Then I will trust," he said at last, "even when I do not see, even when I do not understand." The man smiled, feeling the weight of his own doubts lift. "Then you have already begun the journey." As they walked toward the horizon, the dawn breaking before them, the man knew one thing for certain. Faith was never about having all the answers. It was about trusting the one who does. The vessel of divine power. The night was thick with silence, the kind that hums with expectation. David sat alone beneath a canopy of stars, his heart heavy with the weight of his failures. The world had not been kind. Mockery and judgment had followed him like shadows, whispering doubts into his soul. He had tried to walk in his own strength, and he had stumbled. Again and again he had fallen. Then came the whisper, not in the wind, not in the rustling of the leaves, but in the depths of his spirit. "Will you let me in?" David's breath caught. He knew that voice, though he had spent years drowning it out with noise, with ambition, with his own self-will. Yet here it was, patient, unyielding, calling him to surrender. "But I am not worthy," he whispered, his hands trembling. "I am weak. I have failed." The stars did not answer, but the whisper grew stronger. "That is why I come." In that moment, David understood. God was not asking for strength. He was not asking for perfection. He was asking for surrender. To be a vessel was not to be mighty, it was to be willing. A great trembling filled him, not with fear, but with awe. He had spent so long fighting, proving, and trying to carve his own path. But this was different. This was stepping into the unknown, walking where he could not see, and trusting that the hands of the Almighty would guide him. "Let me take control." David exhaled, slow and deep. "Take it, Lord. Take all of it." At that moment, something stirred within him. It was as if fire had been lit in his bones, as if strength beyond his own was coursing through his veins. It was not the might of men, not the fleeting confidence of self-sufficiency, but the unshakable power of the divine. "Not by might, nor by power, but by my spirit," the words of the prophet Zechariah echoed in his mind. He rose to his feet, no longer the same man who had knelt beneath the stars. The world had not changed, the mockery had not ceased, the trials had not vanished, but he had been remade. God had entered in, and that was enough. From that night forward, David walked in a power that was not his own. He faced the storms with calm, the trials with unwavering faith. Those who had once mocked him now watched in silent wonder, for there was something different about him, something unbreakable. He was no longer fighting alone. He was no longer striving in vain. He was a vessel, and the one who filled him was mighty beyond measure. The sacred command, embracing God's presence. The wind howled through the barren valley, whispering secrets only the ancient stones could understand. A lone figure stood at the threshold of the unknown, his heart heavy with questions, his spirit restless. He had journeyed long through the wilderness of doubt, his steps burdened by fear and uncertainty. Yet now, standing before a light too radiant to deny, he heard the voice, not a mere invitation, but a command. "Come," it said. It was not a plea. It was not a request. It was the voice of the one who formed the heavens and carved the depths of the sea, the voice of the Creator, who does not wait for permission to dwell among his own. The man hesitated, trembling under the weight of divine presence. Was he worthy? Was he ready? The trials of his past clung to him like tattered garments, whispering of his failures, his inadequacies. But the voice spoke again, cutting through the noise of his self-doubt. "I have called you by name. You are mine." The words burned within him, igniting something long buried. He had spent his life searching, wandering from one pursuit to another, chasing fulfillment in the hollow echoes of the world. Yet here, in the presence of the Almighty, he found no demand for perfection, no list of prerequisites, only a call to step forward. To resist was folly, to delay was destruction. The world had taught him to hesitate, to weigh every decision against the fragile approval of men. But this was different. This was not the voice of a man. This was the command of the Eternal. The wind stilled, as if all creation held its breath. He lifted his foot, crossing the threshold. The moment he stepped forward, the weight fell away. Clarity surged through his mind, wisdom filled his soul, and confidence steadied his steps. The trials that once defined him were no longer burdens, but testimonies. The scars of the past became marks of grace, reminders of a journey that had always led to this moment. He was not who he had been. He was transformed, reshaped by the presence of the one who had called him. And as he moved forward, he knew this was not the end, but the beginning. The power of divine authority. Nathanael had spent his life in the shadows, cowering beneath the weight of his past mistakes. He had grown accustomed to fear of failure, fear of judgment, fear of himself. But everything changed the night he encountered the authority of God. It began as a whisper in the wind, a voice calling him by name. He turned, yet no one was there. The marketplace around him bustled with merchants, their voices blending into a chaotic symphony of trade. But the voice, this voice, was different. It carried no uncertainty, no hesitation. It was as if reality itself leaned in to listen. "Nathaniel, rise." At that moment his body trembled, not from terror, but from the weight of something far greater than himself. He dropped to his knees, suddenly aware of how small he was. He had heard stories of divine encounters, of men who had been called by God, but they were prophets and kings, men of stature, not him, not a man who had squandered years chasing hollow ambitions. "Why do you fear?" the voice asked. Nathaniel could not answer. The words lodged in his throat like stones, but deep inside, he knew. Fear had been his master for too long. It had dictated his choices, robbed him of joy, and shackled him in invisible chains. He had walked through life as a prisoner of his own making. "Walk in my authority," the voice continued, "not as a servant of fear, but as a son of the Most High." Something unseen, yet undeniable, shifted within him. It was not a mere emotional stirring, not the fleeting inspiration that came and went like the morning dew. No, this was real, tangible. The very air seemed to hum with energy, as though the fabric of creation itself acknowledged the one who spoke. Nathaniel rose to his feet, though he did not remember commanding his legs to move. His heart beat steadily, not in panic, but in purpose. He took a step forward, and another. The weight that had once bound him had fallen away like shattered chains. He had not merely been encouraged, he had been transformed. From that day, everything changed. He no longer moved through life with timidity, but with confidence. When challenges arose, he met them with unwavering resolve, not because of his own strength, but because he understood whose authority he carried. It was no longer his name that defined him, but the name of the one who had called him. Those who knew him marveled. "What happened to you?" they asked. "You were once afraid of your own shadow. Now you walk as if nothing can touch you." Nathaniel smiled, not with pride, but with the certainty of a man who had finally understood his place in the divine order. "I walk in the authority of the one who commands the stars," he answered. "And in his presence, fear has no hold." This was no mere symbol. It was no illusion of confidence. It was the unshakable reality of God's authority. And it changed everything, overcoming ridicule and rising above doubt. The night was thick with silence. The stars shimmered above like a council of watchful eyes, their cold glow casting a quiet judgment upon the earth. In the heart of a small village, a man stood alone. His words had stirred the people, yet not in the way he had hoped. They whispered behind closed doors, their voices laced with suspicion. They watched him from the shadows, their gazes heavy with doubt. He had spoken truth, and for that, he was despised. He had not sought their approval, nor had he wished for their praise. Yet he had hoped that they would listen, hoped that they would see. But now he saw their backs turned against him, their hearts sealed like stone. This, he realized, was the great test. It had been the same for the prophets before him. Noah had built the ark under the mockery of his neighbors, their laughter ringing in his ears as he obeyed the voice of God. Moses had stood before Pharaoh, unwavering, though the ruler's heart grew harder with every demand. Elijah had called down fire from heaven, only to find himself hunted like a criminal. Even the Messiah himself had walked this path, beloved one moment, condemned the next. Why should it be any different now? The struggles, mockery, hatred and disbelief were preparation for this divine transformation. The world does not welcome the chosen ones. Their presence is an affront, a reminder that truth is not subject to popular opinion. Their steadfastness is a challenge, exposing the frailty of human compromise. To belong to God is to be a stranger in one's own land, to walk a road where every step invites scorn. A voice called out in the dark, breaking his thoughts. "Why do you persist? Why speak when they do not listen?" He turned to face the speaker. It was a young man, his eyes sharp with curiosity, yet dimmed with hesitation. There was fear in his voice, fear of the answer, fear of what it might demand. He smiled, not in derision, but in understanding. Because the truth remains, even when ignored, and God's calling does not fade with the world's rejection. The young man frowned. "But does it not weary you, to be mocked, to be cast aside? Of course, he admitted. Even Christ wept. Even he asked why he was forsaken. But seeking the approval of men is a snare. Their praise is fleeting, their acceptance fickle. To seek their favor is to be blown like chaff in the wind, but to trust in God, that is to stand upon the rock. The wind whispered through the trees, rustling the leaves like a murmuring crowd. The young man looked away, lost in thought. Then what is victory, if not their approval? Victory is transformation. Those who doubted or ridiculed will soon witness God's undeniable power at work. What was once weakness will be replaced with unshakable strength. The change will be instantaneous and undeniable, shifting perception. Victory is to remain faithful, to trust when all else wavers, to endure even when abandoned. It is not measured in applause, nor in the absence of trial, but in the unwavering grip upon God's truth. The young man exhaled, a slow, weary breath. Yet there was something new in his eyes, something kindled. "Then I will stand," he said at last. "Even if they turn away, even if they laugh." A smile broke upon the older man's face, not of triumph, but of joy. "Then you have passed the test." And with that they turned towards the rising dawn, walking the road that so few dared to take, becoming a vessel of divine power. Elijah stood at the river's edge, his feet sinking slightly into the damp earth. The sun was setting, casting a golden glow across the waters. He had heard stories of the power of God, of seas parting, fire descending from heaven, and the dead rising to life. Yet he had always wondered, could such power manifest in him? The air grew thick, charged with an unseen force. A voice, neither loud nor soft but resonant, spoke from within him. "You were made for more." The words trembled through his bones. Every cell in his body seemed to awaken, as if a dormant energy had been waiting for this moment. His breath deepened, his vision sharpened, and a strength not his own surged through him. A shadow of doubt crossed his mind. He had always been ordinary, a fisherman's son, a man of no renown. Yet, as the divine presence filled him, his fears and insecurities dissolved like mist before the morning sun. He was no longer merely Elijah, he was a vessel of God's power. He turned and saw the village where he had spent his years in quiet obscurity. But something had changed. People who once overlooked him now gazed at him with an unspoken reverence. It was not Elijah they saw, but the presence of something far greater. Strength coursed through his limbs, confidence radiated from his being, and with every step he felt the weight of divine authority settle upon him. An old man approached, his face lined with years of hardship. "Elijah," he whispered, "I am blind. Will you pray for me?" Elijah hesitated, but the voice within him spoke again. "Lay your hands upon him." Obediently he reached out. The moment his hands touched the man's weathered skin, warmth flooded through them. The old man gasped, his milky eyes clearing until they reflected the world anew. "I can see," he cried, falling to his knees. A murmur spread through the crowd. Some gasped in awe, others whispered in doubt, but there was no denying what had happened. Elijah himself could barely comprehend it, yet he knew the truth. This was not his doing. It was the presence of God working through him. One by one, the sick, the weary, and the broken came. Elijah touched them, spoke to them, and prayed over them. The lame walked, the sorrowful found joy, and those burdened by fear felt peace settle over them like a gentle dawn. "Who is this man?" someone asked. But another voice answered, "He is not the one doing this, it is God within him." Elijah looked to the heavens, his heart ablaze with wonder. He had sought proof of God's power but found something greater, the realization that he was not merely a spectator of divine works, but a participant. He had become a vessel through which the kingdom of heaven touched the earth. That night, as the stars glimmered above, Elijah knelt by the river again. "Lord," he whispered, "I am yours, use me." And the voice answered, "You already are." The transformation, when God's presence renews the soul. It was a day like any other, or so it seemed. The air carried the same familiar scent of the earth, The wind whispered through the trees, as it had done for ages, and the sun cast its golden rays over the land. Yet, for one weary traveler, something unseen was stirring. A profound change would alter everything he had known. Elias had walked this road before. His heart was heavy, burdened by years of weariness and doubt. His reflection in the river spoke of a man aged beyond his years, lines of sorrow etched upon his face, shoulders bent under the invisible weight of past regrets. He had sought God in prayers that felt unanswered, in silence that stretched endlessly. Then, in the quiet, something shifted. A presence, gentle yet undeniable, descended upon him. It was not like the storms that raged, nor the earthquakes that shattered the land, but something deeper, like a whisper that spoke straight to the soul. Elias felt it before he saw it, an energy that pulsed through his veins, a warmth spreading through his limbs. He stood straighter, his breath coming easier, his very skin glowing with an unearthly light. He looked down at his hands, which had trembled with age and exhaustion. Now they were steady, strong. The deep aches that had once gripped his bones vanished like mist before the morning sun. He touched his face, his skin smooth, the weight of years lifted as if they had never been. His reflection in the river revealed eyes no longer dulled by sorrow, but blazing with a newfound radiance. It was more than physical. His heart, once encased in the shadows of regret, beat with a renewed purpose. Doubt gave way to certainty, fear yielded to peace. It was as if the very presence of God had woven itself into his being, filling every space with light. He felt, for the first time in years, truly alive. As he continued his journey, others took notice. Strangers paused to gaze at him, drawn by the inexplicable energy surrounding him. Those who had once dismissed him now sought his words, sensing something beyond human comprehension. He no longer carried the burdens of yesterday. The weightless joy of divine renewal had replaced them. An old friend met him on the road, astonishment in his eyes. "Elias, what has happened to you? You look different, younger, stronger." Elias smiled. "I have been in the presence of the Almighty, and He has made all things new." The friend hesitated, searching for words. "But how?" "It is not something to be explained, only experienced. The weight I carried has been lifted. The years that drained me have been restored. It is as if I have been reborn, not only in body but in spirit. God's presence does not merely heal, it transforms." The friend looked at him long and hard before nodding. "Then I too must seek Him." Elias clasped his shoulder. "Then let us walk together." And so they did. Two men, one renewed, the other seeking, walking a road that now seemed bathed in light, each step a testament to the power of divine presence. The world had not changed, but Elias had, and in his transformation, others would find the courage to seek the one who makes all things new. A new season of power and purpose. The air was different that morning, not just in the way it carried the scent of dew-kissed earth, but in the way it hummed with something unseen, a presence, a promise. Ezra knew the moment he awoke that his life was about to change. For too long he had wandered the wilderness of doubt, clutching to past struggles as though they defined him. But today, the season was shifting. No longer would he merely survive. Today he would step into the fullness of God's plan. The morning sun painted golden streaks across the valley below as he rose. This was the land he had once feared he would never inherit. It had been a journey marked by loss, waiting, and prayers that seemed to echo in an empty sky. But now, as he stood upon the threshold of a new season, clarity dawned upon him. God had been shaping him all along. The voice of the Lord stirred in his heart, gentle yet commanding. "Rise, my servant, walk in my authority, fear no more." Ezra inhaled deeply, the weight of his past breaking like chains around his ankles. He stepped forward, not merely into the day, but into a destiny long prepared. No longer was he a man of uncertainty. He was an heir to the promise, a steward of divine purpose. As he descended toward the city, the once hostile gates seemed to welcome him. Where once he had been rejected, now he walked with favor. Men and women who had doubted him now turned to listen. He spoke with wisdom that was not his own, and doors opened before him, not by force, but by divine decree. One evening, standing before the gathered people, he declared, "The trials you have faced were never meant to break you. They were stones beneath your feet, lifting you higher. Every delay was preparation. Every hardship was refining. Do you not see? We were never meant to endure merely, but to reign in the fullness of God's calling." A murmur of agreement rippled through the crowd. Eyes that had been clouded with despair now shone with understanding. The power of faith was to withstand storms and walk upon the waves. Ezra continued, "When the Israelites stood at the edge of the promised land, fear held them back, but those who dared to believe entered into rest. So it is with us. The time of wandering is over. We must take hold of what God has promised, not with hesitation, but with boldness." That night, Ezra prayed beneath the vast heavens. The same stars that once bore witness to his cries of uncertainty now seemed to sing of his purpose. He understood now, faith was not a hope for better days, but the unwavering step into them. With dawn came a new beginning. Ezra no longer walked as a man uncertain. He moved as one commissioned, as one who had been tested and proven. The season of survival had ended, and the season of power and purpose had begun, overcoming ridicule and rising above doubt. The night was thick with silence. The stars shimmered above like a council of watchful eyes, their cold glow casting a quiet judgment upon the earth. In the heart of a small village, a man stood alone. His words had stirred the people, yet not in the way he had hoped. They whispered behind closed doors, their voices laced with suspicion. They watched him from the shadows, their gazes heavy with doubt. He had spoken truth, and for that he was despised. He had not sought their approval, nor had he wished for their praise. Yet he had hoped that they would listen, hoped that they would see. But now he saw their backs turned against him, their hearts sealed like stone. This, he realized, was the great test. It had been the same for the prophets before him. Noah had built the ark under the mockery of his neighbors, their laughter ringing in his ears as he obeyed the voice of God. Moses had stood before Pharaoh, unwavering, though the ruler's heart grew harder with every demand. Elijah had called down fire from heaven, only to find himself hunted like a criminal. Even the Messiah himself had walked this path, beloved one moment, condemned the next. Why should it be any different now? The struggles, mockery, hatred, and disbelief were preparation for this divine transformation. The world does not welcome the chosen ones. Their presence is an affront, a reminder that truth is not subject to popular opinion. Their steadfastness is a challenge, exposing the frailty of human compromise. To belong to God is to be a stranger in one's own land, to walk a road where every step invites scorn. A voice called out in the dark, breaking his thoughts. "Why do you persist? Why speak when they do not listen?" He turned to face the speaker. It was a young man, his eyes sharp with curiosity, yet dimmed with hesitation. There was fear in his voice, fear of the answer, fear of what it might demand. He smiled, not in derision, but in understanding. Because the truth remains, even when ignored, and God's calling does not fade with the world's rejection. The young man frowned. "But does it not weary you? To be mocked, to be cast aside?" "Of course," he admitted. "Even Christ wept. Even he asked why he was forsaken. But seeking the approval of men is a snare. Their praise is fleeting, their acceptance fickle. To seek their favor is to be blown like chaff in the wind. But to trust in God? That is to stand upon the rock." The wind whispered through the trees, rustling the leaves like a murmuring crowd. The young man looked away, lost in thought. Then, what is victory, if not their approval? Victory is transformation. Those who doubted or ridiculed will soon witness God's undeniable power at work. What was once weakness will be replaced with unshakable strength. The change will be instantaneous and undeniable, shifting perception. Victory is to remain faithful, to trust when all else wavers, to endure even when abandoned. It is not measured in applause or the absence of trial, but in the unwavering grip upon God's truth. The young man exhaled, a slow, weary breath. Yet there was something new in his eyes, something kindled. "Then I will stand," he said at last, "even if they turn away, even if they laugh." A smile broke upon the older man's face, not of triumph but of joy. "Then you have passed the test." And with that, they turned towards the rising dawn, walking the road that so few dared to take. And so the moment has come. You stand at the threshold of something far greater than you had ever imagined. Not merely a change, but a complete transformation. The old self, bound by fear and uncertainty, is fading away. In its place rises one who walks in divine strength, no longer shackled by yesterday's doubts. This is not the end of the journey, but the beginning of a life infused with purpose, clarity, and unstoppable faith. The trials that once weighed you down were never meant to break you. They were the fires that refined you, preparing you for this very moment. Now the presence of God moves within you, reshaping not only your path, but your very being. You no longer seek approval from the world, for you carry the authority of the one who called you. Step forward with boldness. The world may not yet understand, but soon they will see.